Good evening, all. Thank you for joining us today for this second edition of Coffee Pay Charcha. So today we have one of the most prominent business families in the state. From Kuttukaran group, we have John K. Paul and Naveen in conversation with Rajesh Nair, Associate Partner EY today. Over to you, Rajesh.
Johnny sir will. So as Arun said, this is actually Coffee Per Charcha 2.0. We started this earlier. We had to stop because of the pandemic. Can you hear me now? Yeah. So we had to stop when the pandemic came. So which means close to 2.5, 3 odd years we've not had a Coffee Per Charcha program. For those of you who are new to this series of programs, what we have is we have some of the senior charter members coming and talking about their own entrepreneurial story of their organization, the travails they passed through. And the idea is also to get some insights from what they have gone through. So today it's even more special because we have 2 charter members today. So we have Johnny sir and we have Naveen as well. And they will cover the popular story. We want to hear the past. We want to hear what's happening right now, and we want to hear what are the future plans as well. And so that's the format of the event. My job is only the moderator. I don't want to say moderator. It's more like furniture right now. So I'll ask a few questions just to point and give direction here and there. But otherwise, there isn't much. It's largely the popular story that we want to hear. Having said that, I'll give a very brief introduction. We are not reading out, a resume sorts. Johnny sir is one of the oldest charter members that we have in Thai Kerala. The entire ThaiCons, if you have attended, was an idea that he picked up from Silicon Valley, and they used to have these conferences there. And the scale at which the ThaiCon happens in Kerala is much larger than a lot of those ThaiCons that you would see in the rest of India. And we started this entire process in 2012, and he was the president then. And not just because he was the president, but he was the visionary behind this entire conference that we had. A lot of us shared his vision, and I would say there are a lot of Johnny sir followers, and he's called His Holiness amongst our circles. And he has given direction to a lot of those innovative events that we have done across the years. Naveen joined us as a charter member several years ago. And Naveen is the new face of Popular, and probably he will take the legacy to much higher heights than what the original founder KP Paul did, and Johnny sir and his brother Francis sir did. And we will hear that entire story. So to begin with, I'll ask Johnny sir to look at Popular the way it is today, and probably touch on some of the aspects on how it came across and what is it today, and your vision of the entire organization.
Expect me to stand and talk?
No. I think he can sit and talk. And, yeah.
You want me to stand and talk? Please. Okay. So I'll stand as long as I can. So, good afternoon. See, from what Rajesh was telling you, Popular is a very old story. I mean, when I say very old story, it's an 83-year-old story. I'm sure you don't want to hear those 83-year-olds. So I'll start with what we are today and how we came about in our dealership. Because from the old story, a dealership is much shorter. It's about 50%. Okay. It's about 50%, but that's also almost 40 years. So when we first started, or when we thought about the dealership, I was just about 5 years into our business, and Maruti announced that they're looking when the first advertisement came, we didn't even look at it. Okay. I mean, we just about talked about it and left it there. The reason was that our spare parts business, which was, again, almost 45 years by then, was the premier spare parts distribution in the country. I'm talking about not distribution, retail. There's no such retail organization in anywhere part of India, or most foreign countries didn't have a system of spare parts retail the way we have. At that time, our switching counter used to be about 90 feet long. And at 10 o'clock when the shutter opened, you get 3-4 layers of people standing one behind the other, because the whole counter was divided into each car's spares. So you had an ambassador section, a Fiat section, a truck section, and truck also Tata and various other. Each vehicle, then you had a foreign car section. So people who wanted that would come and stand there. And they would all be stretching over the other person, Chata, he listed to the, he listed to the. So that is the time when this advertisement for a dealership is coming through. And we said, we have our own business. Should we go in for this? Okay. The thought lingered on, and we didn't have much time. It was a month's time. But then we presented to my dad. The first reaction was, no, that's not our business. There'll be other people telling us to run the business, how to run the business. We have our own business, don't you think that is it? So our argument was, you've gone abroad. Nowhere in the world can you see this sort of a spare parts shop. Do you really want, where do you think we are going? I mean, it took him a few seconds. He said, you go, you apply, no paying for anything, no underground dealings. I'll tell you why I'm saying this. And you apply, and if you get it from your merit, you take it. So the reason why I said this is, this was originally started by somebody else. And there was a lot of hanky-panky, and at the end, people lost money, and that was closed down. And then the Indian Parliament, through an act of the Parliament, took over all the property of the company and collaborated with somebody else and brought out what you see as today's Maruti. So we applied. We did our best because there was no particular thing saying that you have to apply this way or anything. We just created an application and sent it. For our luck, we got it. Okay. Now, the first thing we hear is Maruti is going to manufacture, the first year, is going to manufacture 40,000 vehicles. All the other three put together was making some 25 or 30,000. So we're wondering, if we take this agency, where the hell will we go and sell this? Anyway, we said if somebody has got that thought process coming in, they must have done their homework at least. So we took it. And we took it in Trivandrum, because they gave it only in Trivandrum, in the sense their first dealerships were all in the capital of the state. And that time, even in our spare parts business, we had Cochin, we had Tricho, and we had Calicut. But we didn't have a spare parts shop in Trivandrum, because we thought there was hardly any car market in Trivandrum at that time. And this dealership was being given to us over there. But we took it. And when we took this thing, as I said, they were planning to sell 40,000 or maybe 200-300 cars a month. So when you look at those volumes, the Hindustan Motors had a waiting list of 1 year. Premier probably a little longer or not very much shorter. So when you have enough orders on your plate, you don't need a salesperson, because everybody who wanted a car will come, will sit there, will give you whatever price you talk about and book it and go, right? Maruti is coming with a volume of 40,000 cars. They're going to sit on your head to sell it. So that's the time when we started taking salespeople. See, it was definitely not the scene that you see at any showroom today. We had to take people, and as we grew, we started, a person who we absorbed in Cochin, he wouldn't like to go and work in, say, Perumbour. He'll take an hour to get there. An hour in the evening, he has to come back. In between, probably he'll meet about 2 or 3 people. So, naturally, a lot of things kept developing. For example, today, any manufacturer has a set of dealers, and they have on the outskirts, they have the same dealer to open their outlets. They call it a rural outlet or an extended outlet, depending on the size of the town. All manufacturers have it. And all of them copied it from Maruti. And Maruti took that idea from us. That is, we started these extended counters, and hence that became a norm in Maruti. Initially, they said it can't be done because you've been given a dealership in this place. We proved to them why it is effective. And hence, while they did territories in all other states in India, they left Kerala as it was. Any dealer could open anywhere. Otherwise, what happens is you become like a frog in the well. You think that's your territory, you do what you feel like because customers have to come to you. Whereas when we did this, everybody became competitive. Okay. And when we came to know that we got the dealership, we actually took a set of engineers, about 15, 20 of them, and started training them. We had not even got the LOI. But we had a training school we had already started training for our spare parts salespeople before this, even before Maruti first came in. Okay. So we used those talents, we used those people, trainers from outside to start training. And we had somebody in our Charcha shop where we were training them on imported cars, just getting ready for when Maruti comes in. So why I'm telling you this is because innovation can be done in anything that you're doing. And in an entrepreneurship, fundamentally what is entrepreneurship? Is finding a comfortable way for the public to take care of either a need or an issue, a problem. If there's a problem, depending on the size of the problem and how many people it affects, there's a better chance for entrepreneurship. So if you look around you, you'll always find an issue. Don't think there's only a problem. There are some things, it is a problem, but people have just left it as it is. I mean, you can't solve it, or there's nothing about it. But if you look at all the startups, I mean, including Amazon, what is Amazon doing? It's doing trade. Trade is probably one of the oldest entrepreneurships. I mean, from the time immemorial, people have been trading something or buying or selling something or bartering something. That's the same thing they're doing. But they're doing it, making it much, much easier for the public. So when we did this, we were actually going to the doorstep as close as possible to the customer. So even our spread of workshops, everything, our services, service stations, we kept spreading it so that our customer, anybody would want to become a customer. For example, these extended outlets when we started, you should realize this is almost 40 years ago. Okay. Most people at that time thought they couldn't afford a car. Say, for example, a school teacher or somebody in the post office never imagined, or in my younger days, I would see them only traveling by cycle. Okay, today, there won't be a teacher without a car, or somebody in the government service without a car, because they can afford it. But in those days, people never thought they could do it. Though they may have had the money, they never thought they would do it, and they thought it was a luxury, you don't need. So when we started these extended outlets, we noticed something else. We would go and put a car outside, outside these small outlets. And then you'd see people walking across. As they walk across, they'll stop. Naturally, new car lying there, they want to see what it is. The moment our salesperson notices that anybody is showing any interest, he'll latch on and say, come. He says, I don't have the money. I said, sir, you don't have to have the money. Can't you pay 1,000 rupees a month? He says, of course I can. Then why can't you? You can afford to buy a car. So we literally, hung it over them. So and as we spread, this is how we were able to get across to customers, create a demand and sell it to them. So there is, everything, if you keep on doing something, you will keep finding something. I always quote one thing my father used to say. Says, "Da chiyannovane tettu pettullu. Chiyathonu oru tettu pettullu. Onnum cheydilla ennallu tettullu." So you keep doing things. You may make mistakes. You will learn from it. If you're serious about it, you will learn from it. And from that learning, you will build on it. So I'm not going into the nitty-gritty. If when you question, you can always ask questions. I'll try and explain.
Yeah. What I'll do is we'll come back to Johnny sir after a quick interaction with Naveen as well. So Naveen, you've seen the business ever since you joined, probably in the 90s.
Yeah. Late 90s.
Late 90s.
Yeah.
Not
that old.
Just a little less hair than.
So, what was the business as you look at the last 20 years? What was the business? How has it progressed? What is it today, and what do you see as the future?
So, I came into the business to start off the commercial vehicle division as such. At that point of time, I think we used to sell about 3 trucks a month. And today we sell approximately 1,000 trucks a month. So, in terms of growth, definitely there's been growth. But in terms of the complexity of the business, initial years, I think from the time that Maruti started to most of the other organizations, it was sales that was attractive, and which is why a lot of people invest money to become a dealer. I sold 100 cars, I sold 50 Mercedes, I sold 200 Maruti, etc. But this business is actually a service business. So the money and the complexity lies in the service side of business. So today, though we sell approximately approximately 40,000 vehicles, all models put together, Maruti, Honda, Tata, Jaguar, etc. We service approximately 90,000 vehicles a month. And this 40,000 vehicles we sell in a year. So that 90,000 vehicles, and I think everyone sitting in this room, if I want to give my car for service, first I think it's always seen as it's a non-transparent process. If I give my car for service, is the service good? Have they changed the part that they've said? Have they done more? Have they billed me more, etc.? So one is to make the process as transparent as possible, which it was not 20 years or 30 years ago. So making the transparent process and buying the customer's trust in that process. And to service 100,000 vehicles a month is more like a production thing. But we are not into manufacturing. And for manufacturing, it's the same item that comes out of the factory at the end of the day. But when a person comes and gives a car for service, out of the 1,000 cars that we receive every day for service, I think about 800 would be unique with its problems. So to sort of seamlessly get it done to the satisfaction of the customer, I think that's a challenge, but that's where the money is also. So growing the service business for the future. So a lot of people ask us this question as to when electric vehicles come, what will happen to service? Because most of the papers would have reported that there's 85% less components in an electric vehicle as compared to a IC engine or a mechanical vehicle. For us, the large part of our business in terms of where the profits come from is actually the body shop. And today we do approximately 70 to 80% of our earnings come from there. And as long as there are a million vehicles that come out of in India, especially two-wheelers and auto rickshaws, the body shop business will keep growing. So whether it's electric or IC, I mean, I don't think there's a vehicle that any of us uses which does not have a scratch on it. And that's where the business is going to. So if you look at across the world, that is the prime part of the business, but it's also the hardest part of the business to make the customer happy. So getting that fine-tuned and getting that run as a manufacturing system is what the challenge is about.
In terms of the next plans, is the expansion of dealership the immediate plan, or would you pick up a larger portfolio of products and have dealerships?
So today, in our dealership portfolio, we have 3 car manufacturers. So the way we designed it is that we started off only with Maruti, and then we want to have a car segment which is just above Maruti, and we chose Honda because that was the most trusted name in terms of brand, etc. Today it's not doing too well, but in terms of brand equity, it still holds fort. And then we wanted one higher level, which we started off with Jaguar Land Rover. In the truck side, we had Tata Trucks we started off with, which is the bread and butter of India's truck movement. And then we wanted a truck which was slightly higher in terms of quality and in terms of perception of quality, and which we took Mercedes-Benz or Bharat-Benz as it is known. We were initially only in Kerala, whereas our spare parts business was spread across India when the retail was there. So we're trying to replicate that, slightly more complicated to replicate it in the vehicle business than the spare parts business, because spare parts is just a trade. Here you actually have to service the vehicle. But today we've been successfully running it across 3 states, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala. The immediate focus is to take it across the entire Deccan Plateau up till Maharashtra. So we would cover Karnataka and Tamil Nadu in more depth, and Gujarat, Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh also to start off with.
And what really worries you right now in terms of the future, when you look at technology and when you look at new products coming in, let's say like the electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, the electric vehicles is definitely, so I wouldn't say that the vehicle category is a threat, but I think as digital takes on the threat or the perceived threat is, would a manufacturer require a dealer? So in all industries, we would see between the manufacturer to the customer, the number of layers being reduced. So today we are a dealership. So I keep thinking from the manufacturer side, Tesla has done away with dealers. So why can't any other manufacturer do the same, given digital, given the process involved, etc. So that is one major threat, not in terms of electric vehicles, but in the fact that should manufacturers have dealerships, should manufacturers have distributors. So we are also very large distributors of spare parts. We are the 2nd largest or 3rd largest in India. Would manufacturers require distributors? Why can't they just give it straight to the workshop per se? And will we be removed from the system? So that is definitely a fear. The only silver lining in that is that today, I think over the last 5 years, more than 120% of our profits come from the service side of business. And that is something that we don't think the manufacturers can replicate. It is not easy to replicate. So even if when you look at Tesla, when they say they don't have dealerships, they have actually authorized body shops. So that is where we have specialized in. And I think that would be the survival of it. But we'll have to rethink the way we build our showrooms, the way we have manpower in our sales side.
Johnny sir, if you rewind further, some of us have heard the story of Mr. K.P. Paul being a party worker and then starting this business, and probably being a party worker even before the Communist Party was formed. And how did that happen, and how did he become an entrepreneur?
Still, I have to figure out. Anyway, he was working in a shop in Trichy. Okay. At that time, slowly there was in Trichy a small organization of workers called the Laborers Brotherhood. You wouldn't have heard of it, but you would have heard of CITU. This was from where CITU came in. Okay. So my dad was very involved with all that, and one day in May 1936, they decided to hold a procession. So, to take a procession around the round, as they call it in Trichy. And they all decided, they were senior people, they said they'll come. 4 o'clock was the time. My dad, he was always very precise on time. He was there at 3, 3:30, 3:45, 4, 4, 5. There was nobody. There were just 3 or 4 people standing around. He picked up the flag and walked. So the person behind him, I don't know, some of our senior people may remember a person called K.K. Warrior. K.K. Warrior was part of Achudanan and all those people who actually started the Communist Party those days. He personally told me, he said he didn't even look back. At the end of the day, end of the procession, there were only 7 people, including him. But that was on May 1st, 1936. He was the first person in Kerala to lift a communist flag and walk in a procession. When I say 1936, we are still under the British rule. Okay. And the Kerala Communist Party formed only in 1939. In 1939, my father became an entrepreneur. No one asked me why, but he was always associated with the party, contributed to the Deshamani in huge numbers in those days when it was being, new presses were installed. He was always very involved till his last minute, because I was by his bedside and he was getting my sister to read the Deshamani to him. So that at the age of 93. So he never, his basic mindset never changed. And he would threaten us when we were children, if you don't study, you can probably go and clean some, rusted parts. Don't think you can come and manage this. I'll give it to the Communist Party. That used to be his line of. So he suddenly realized that, to look after the family, communism probably won't be around. But I, at times, try to remember what Winston Churchill is supposed to have said. He said, till the age of 25, if you're not a communist, you don't have a heart. And after the age of 25, if you're still a communist, you don't have a head. Okay. Anyway, that's jokes apart. He says all these sort of things. But what I'm saying is, my father became an entrepreneur, and he didn't become an entrepreneur in the sense he just didn't do something and then slowly built on that or something. He actually tried. His mother ran a small business out of her house, and she gave him some money. He took that money. He walked around, talked to friends, talked to people, and tried his hand at 2, 3 different businesses. And finally, he landed up at a business as a laundry, to start a laundry. And his idea was that service was always in his mind, and his idea was that the laundry will take care of your clothes like you would do at home when you wash it at home. So he didn't call it popular laundry, he called it popular washing home. Okay, and it used to be so precise that people would jokingly say you could adjust your watch at the time when the cycleman rings his bell, the pickup or drop. Okay. But within a year, so he was told it will cost him 75 rupees, and he had 150 with him. So he kept investing it. By the 6th month, he had invested all his 150 rupees. But the 6th month, his profit was 150 rupees. From there on, he understood that there's enough money to look for another business. And his home used to be very close to a street people in Trichy would know. It used to be called Patalam Road, where all the old trucks or any vehicle for that matter used to be dismantled. That used to be the automobile market. So every day when he crossed it, he would always think, I should do something in automobile. And within 6 months, he moved out of his laundry and started the automobile. And there also, service was first. He first started in the first month, he started with cycle repair, battery repair, and tire repair. Okay. This is in 1939. I'll tell you what's the significance of 1939. The first month he gave up cycle repair. Within 2, 3 months he gave up battery repair. And in 1939, World War II had just started. So everything that you know of, whether it's food, whether it's tires, anything was in short supply. So people, who used to run the bus or truck, they would come, stop and say, can you repair this tire for me? It'll take hours before it was repaired and put back, and his service is gone for that much time. So while he was doing this, he just thought, suppose I had some repaired tires. New tires not available. It's only second-hand tires. If I could pick up a few second-hand tires from somewhere, keep it ready, and when these people came, just service them. So it would be a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes, he would be back on his way. And he started doing that. And from there, people would come and say, the next time when you go somewhere, can you get this part for me? So those days, there were only 2 trucks. It would be either a Ford or a Chevrolet. So it was not very complicated. Everybody knew anybody in that field would know. So he started doing that. And then he started going in search of where, the sources from where he could get it. And you won't believe it. His first shop or his business was in Trichy. His first branch was in Calcutta. It was not in Cochin or anywhere else, or not in Coimbatore or Bangalore, but it was in Calcutta, because he kept finding out where the source was. And even parts that came to Bangalore came from Calcutta. And around after 45, 46, war was over, the Burmese border had all these British and American vehicles being sold, the vehicle parts being sold from the army. It was called disposal. They were actually disposing of it. So it could be brand new, it could be slightly used, it could be used. And in 48, we started this in Calcutta. Then they found that these parts were coming from Siliguri, which is in Assam, and Shillong. Sorry, not Siliguri, in Shillong. And, the 47, the partition had taken place. Before that, from Shillong to Calcutta, a truck would take, say, 7 to 10 days. After the partition, East Bengal, or then East Pakistan, had come in between. It would take 1.5 months. So then they started finding out what to do, because you get truck chassis, and the truck chassis was not as long as today's chassis. It was probably about this distance, about, say, 15 feet. But if you put it on a truck, it wouldn't take much more. So you know what they did? They kept finding out what to do, how to do it. And they chartered a flight. And the flight would take 6 chassis and a lot of spare parts inside. It was chartered from Shillong to Calcutta. And from Calcutta, it would come from the Sealdah station, it would come in wagons to Trichy. And the price lists were made and sent out. And we had customers from Kakinada or further north, which was closer to Calcutta than from Kakinada to Trichy. So that was providing service. Another thing that he used to quote is, those days in a car, you had a distributor and you had a point, a cutoff point. It used to be called a point where this parking used to take place. So one day a customer came to him and said, I want this point. That is a very regular thing. But he was sold out. Okay. So he said, I thought over for a few seconds, what do I do? I can tell the customer, I don't have it. Come back another day and I'll give it to you. But the customer needs his vehicle to run. So what would he do? He'd go to the next shop. And by chance, if that shopkeeper was able to service him, what would happen? Next time that customer would go there first and then only come to him. So he told the customer to wait. He took the whole assembly, the distributor assembly. In front of the customer, he took it out and he said, here you are. He'll get another one and fit it back. So he said, what I was able to do to the customer was, one, I was able to service him the part that he wanted. Second is, because I did it right in front of him, the customer felt that I would go any way, any distance to service him. So that philosophy we still have. There are occasions where we have replaced cars, not due to a fault of ours alone. There have been maybe a chance of one, but even from the manufacturer side or some other side, one of our old people is sitting here, Noel will be able to say, we have actually replaced cars and sold the other car as a used car or anything. because the customer is not satisfied. He says, I bought a new car, but this car has this problem or some issue. But why we have gone to those lengths is to prove to people that we are with you. And that's what tagline says, journeys, Kuttukaran journeys with you. So we will maintain that for anything. Like Rajesh was asking Naveen about what is the future. See, the thing is, when the market is changing, dynamic, if you're very much in the market, we'll find a way. We'll see what happens. Now, if you ask about Tesla, when Tesla came in, for last 10 years, Tesla was almost alone. Because they were trying to prove a point saying that electric cars will run. And the other manufacturers kept thinking that they will close down at some time, Chapter 11, as the US Americans say. See, because why I'm telling you this is, you should understand the background from, the first automobile or patent for IC engines was taken in 1806. And that patent was taken for running the vehicle on hydrogen and oxygen, which is what the latest engineering is saying, that the future cars will be hydrogen run. And the first electric car was in 1836. The first IC engine car was late 80s, almost 45, 50 years later. In the early 1900s, more electric cars or equal number of electric cars were sold as IC engine cars. It was only after Henry Ford brought down the price of the IC engine cars by assembling it on conveyor belts, which brought down the price by 2/3. That means the price came down to 1/3. That is when electric cars slowly went out. So when again electric cars coming back, okay, then it was lead acid battery, today's lithium ion batteries. But when it came back, the big manufacturers find it difficult to believe. Okay. But once they take on, then what happens is, then there's competition in the market. Once competition comes in, if you don't have a representative in the market to sell your product, it may be difficult. So till now, there's only Tesla as an electric car. But tomorrow, there are going to be many more. When there are many more, and there are people trying to sell it, probably Tesla will also want a dealer.
Thanks, Anand. Naveen, a slightly separate question. We hear a lot of there are a lot of young entrepreneurs and senior entrepreneurs sitting in the audience. Is there an opportunity for an entrepreneur a startup entrepreneur to tie up with Popular? And if yes, what could be possible areas where they could look for partnerships, or some areas where you could look at Popular and you could look at your nature of industry as well?
No, actually, we have actually tied up with Kerala Startup Mission, and we have mentored a few organizations there. And we also said that we would openly like to invest in any startup that would be involved in areas that we're keen on, be it mobility services, be it anything to do with digital, etc. And in fact, we have, not through CAN, but through other means, we have actually invested in platforms that are in direct competition to us, and a startup. One of the startups that we invested in about 2017-18 was a truck hire business, which was like Uber for cars. Three youngsters had started this off in Bangalore. Three of us dealers, Popular, Prerna Motors in Bangalore, and Jasper in Hyderabad. We took a 50% stake in that, and we actually sold that startup to Tata Motors. After scaling it up to an extent, we actually sold it to Tata Motors. It's unfortunate that COVID came in the way, and Tata Motors took a decision that all the startups that they'd invested in the previous year, they will not fund further. But Tata Motors actually had sunk in approximately 20 crores into that startup before they shut it down. So we are always keen on either investing or tying up with any entrepreneur which we think is either going to compete with us or going to be complementing us in our business as such. So there's always an opportunity.
Right. So that's for some of you who are looking for ideas and where you can. One more question, Johnny sir, is on, so you've been a prominent entrepreneur in Kerala, and Kerala is not very popular for entrepreneurship, and you started at a very early time when probably entrepreneurship was a bad word as well. So how did you survive out here for so many years, and how did you not just survive, thrive out here for so many years? What's the secret that the others are missing?
Okay. Today, we as a group employ over 9,000 people. Okay. And maybe 1,000 people are outside the state, but 8,000 odd people we employ within the state. We are, as I said, almost 40 years with Maruti. To be precise, 38 years. You know how Kerala is as far as labor is concerned. I don't have to tell you. We don't have a labor union. We have never lost a man hour due to a labor issue. The reason is we look after our people. At least we think so. Okay, so far we have not been able to, we have not faced such an issue. Our people generally are happier to work with us. And the reason for that is basically in management we always say empower them. It's easier said than done. Okay. We actually try and empower any employer as junior as possible. We try to let them imagine what to do. Because if you look at our industry, as Naveen was saying, it's a service industry. When you say service industry, in manufacturing, you can quantify everything. You can quantify the number of pieces made, the time taken for manufacturing so many pieces, all those things. But in service, you can't. Okay. In service, the person who's dealing with that customer has to feel good to give that customer a proper service. So we say we have to continuously, progressively deliver greater value to the customer. And that is the service industry. For example, I sometimes tell you to show our people, if it's a glass, just imagine this is a glass of water. And if I gave him a glass of water like this, it's okay, right? It's okay. Now, suppose I hold the same glass like this and give it, which is better? This or the previous one? If I hold the glass at the edge like this and give it, generally we are okay with it. But if I hold it like this, you would say that this is better. And suppose I put it on a tray and give it to you. You'd still assume without hardly any cost. But you can give that service in a better platform, in a better way. Everything that we do, if we can do it better, it has to be a continuous practice to do it. That mindset cannot come from us. It has to come from that person to do it, who's doing it. And he must feel that he should do it better, or he should, behave better with the customer. So for that, he must be happy. And probably, I'm not saying that we have never had an issue with customer people or our people. Yes, we have had issues, but we take it seriously. And every time we have an issue, we try and make them understand and give it to them. So that is how, and for us, we have had a labor issue many years ago, not in our service, not in our dealership. In 1986, we had a long strike, but finally that fizzled away. We are very strict on dealing with anything like this. At the same time, we look after our people.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. Naveen, so we have the much talked about IPO coming up. So why an IPO? We don't have too many such firms going for IPOs. And what was the thought process, and what would you ideally want to achieve there?
So when we had a look at our business somewhere around 2012-13, and we decided that if we need to expand at a much faster pace and take over, so a lot of people come into the dealership business because there's a glamour associated with it. If I put up a board which says Maruti dealer or Honda dealer or a Jaguar or a Mercedes dealer, you're immediately recognized within the society. oh, that person is a Mercedes-Benz dealer. But the nuances of making profits in the dealership, as I said, comes from service. And a lot of people enter into the business not understanding that nuance. So when we looked at the market and when we studied, so we went and spent a lot of time in China and US to study how those dealerships have grown. And one of the Chinese dealerships at that point of time was coming out with an IPO. And they initially started off with about 12 stores, 12 dealerships. And at the time that we met them and they were going to the IPO, I think 2 years later, they were doing approximately $1 billion in terms of business. And they actually grew by taking over other smaller companies, by taking in private equity money, and then they were going to list in the Hong Kong market. And similar story had played out in US a couple of decades before. And we thought that we are aptly suited for such a growth in India. And if any dealership could do it, we thought, why can't we do it? Because we were one of the pioneers, we were the first Maruti dealer. And every dealership that we took, Maruti, we were in the top 3 in terms of both sales and in service, we are top 1. I mean, we were the number 1. In Honda, Jaguar, Land Rover, Tata Motors, everything, the story had repeated itself. So we decided that we'll first take private equity money and then go for an IPO at the appropriate time. So we took private equity money in 2015 end. And as soon as we took it, we actually took over 3 dealerships in Honda, Tata and Maruti across the spectrum. And that actually increased in terms of our service and sales capability. So that was the thought process that we decided that we can do it in India. And today we feel it's a right opportune moment because the financial issues that have happened during the COVID, there are a lot more dealerships up for sale than it was there previously. That's it.
Sure.
See, in most advanced countries, the passenger car, I'm not talking about two-wheelers, the passenger car to the number of people is in the range of around 400 to 700 cars per 1,000 people. In India, it is below 30. So you see where the opportunity lies.
Both of you, before we open it up to the audience, your advice to the young, the old, and the potential entrepreneur out here. What should an entrepreneur take away from this session, or from your experience? I'll ask the same question to Naveen as well. Yeah.
Instead of telling you that, I'll tell you something else. But the meaning is the same, okay? So our children, you would probably expect them to be sitting in our office and running the dealership, right? But our dealerships, all of them, are run by professionals. When I say that, I told you we employ almost 1,000 plus people. Okay, my brother, myself, and Naveen are the only 3 people who are from the family who run this business. So we can't run it, right? They've got some almost 300 outlets, 9,000 people. So definitely we are not everywhere. And it is the professionals who run the organization. So today, this organization has grown to a level where it can be run by professionals. Our children have been asked to start their own enterprises. So that, see, if they were to sit in this organization, they're not going to learn something very new. They can innovate. What we have, they can innovate. But then, it is a lot of the direction comes from the OEMs also. So there is a limit to how much they can, innovate. Within the organization, they can innovate and make it a little more efficient. But if they were to start their own organizations, they're going to really learn exactly how to run not just the business, run their families, how innovate everything. I mean, it's their imagination and their hard work. And they will face far more issues than sitting with us. Because here everything is almost solved, It's an organization that's running like clockwork. You just come and sit there. Here and there you may have some issue. Then even that issue will be solved by somebody else. Okay. Whereas if they were to do something on their own, they will have to solve their own problems. From that, they learn. Okay. They can say tomorrow that I have achieved something beyond what my, the business has been or what family we've come from. So there is an opportunity. If there's no opportunity, we wouldn't be pushing them to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no.
I don't think I can add much to that. I think that's a proof of the pudding. But a lot of times, today, I think the case might be little less because all startups are getting enough money and there's free flow of money. But when we started off our businesses, I think cash flow is something that a lot of entrepreneurs lose sight of. Profit on the books, what you see at the end as a P&L statement is not a right parameter to look at initial years. You actually need to look at cash flow. You need to see the positive side of things. When you're running a startup which is consuming cash in a big way, like Flipkart or any of those, I'm not commenting on it, but any other small entrepreneurial venture that you look at, I think part of it was told by my uncle. When my grandfather started his business, he had 150 rupees as capital. He had actually burned that 150 before he started making money. One, always have, if you have estimated X rupees for the business, have at least X plus some delta, which will act as a buffer, at least 50 to 75% more. Two, always look at cash flows because a lot of entrepreneurs, it's easy to give credit in the market and think that you're doing a great business. It normally ends up in, and please do not, in our business, at least our dealership business, I've seen at least, I think 60 to 70% of dealers who have collapsing, not because they were not running a good business, but because if they made 100 rupees, they would decide to invest in the stock market, in real estate, etc., thinking that all that would give much better returns than the business that they were doing. When the market goes down, the stock market also goes down. I have a stock market friend right sitting at the back. And real estate also goes down. And when something that you bought at 100 rupees, you have to sell at 20 rupees to put it in, it hurts. Real estate is even worse because if you bought it at 100 rupees, even if you want to sell it at 20 rupees at that point of time, there'll be no takers. So stick to your knitting to a large extent till you're at a much larger scale and then you can diversify, or always diversify with a certain quantum of money. Don't put all your eggs into diversification as such. That's all.
Thanks a lot, Nair. I think it's very, very interesting and very useful advice, especially on the cash flow and the financials part. We'll now open it to questions, and you can ask them question. When you're asking a question, do mention who you want the question to be answered. And yeah, just go on. We have around another 25, 30 minutes for you to ask questions. Pass a mic around.
Good afternoon.
John sir. Hey, please go ahead. Okay. John sir, I just want to know how do you get the name Popular?
Actually, my father put the name Popular. Right from Popular Washing Home, then when he started this repair and all, he called it. By that time, he was married. Okay, not for Popular Washing Home, but when he started the next ones, his brother-in-law was teaching English. So he would go to him so it became Popular Industrials, then Popular Automobiles, and by the time Popular Vehicles came, we were already there. So, but that Popular name kept coming back.
Thank you for the inspiration. My name is Vimal. I'm the founder of an automotive startup called VI Innovations, incubated in Maker Village. And through Startup Mission, I think I have mailed to you, and I've came to a point that it's almost ready to test with the facility. So I would like to know whether Popular would give me an opportunity to prove in the market, especially in terms of an advanced technology to prove. We need a test facility, and it's very rare in Kerala to get such a facility. So I would like to request your kind support to test the facility and to prove in the market so that the investors come in. So I request your support for that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's an inspiration for all startups. Thank you.
Hi, sir. Very good evening. So it was a wonderful. Sorry. So it was a wonderful session. We got good amount of insights, from an entrepreneurship standpoint. So, sir, my question is related to the people practices you were mentioned. You said that there was no strike, and you really take care of the people, right? So could you please share a little more insight? What are some of the best practices you implemented across the organization so that you could retain the people, right?
No, so in terms of all the regular statutory things apart, that's ESI, PF, and having a dedicated desk for any employee if they go through an issue to ensure that there is a facility. If somebody needs blood transfusion or blood, there is a person to call, one of us, since we have 9,000 people working for us and their own relatives. So any person who's admitted, they would immediately get a help. So these are some of the basic facts that we take care of. But I'll give you 2 examples of what we did, which actually buys in terms of employee trust and all that. One was during the floods. So approximately, I think about 100, 150 people working with us got really affected by the floods across various districts. What we did is within, I think, 2 weeks of the flood happening and all that, we had a team going to each one of these houses, etc., evaluating what they have lost, including replacing a house, and also there were some who have lost everything within the house. So within a span of 2 weeks, everything was replaced, except for building the house, which took a much longer time. But that was done across the organization. So even if it was a mechanic or a peon that lost the house or something else, everything was replaced within a span of 2 weeks. So I think these are gestures that we have done, which was not done with the thought process of employee trust in us, but it was done spontaneously by the HR team per se, without having to check with us about it. So I think that is something that we have imbibed within the organization across all levels.
I'll give you one more point from the old days. Today, bonus and time, working time and all are standard, right? But my father introduced this in the spare parts shops of those times before it was statutory, before the parliament started, long before that, because I told you he was this communist blood in him. So we closed the shutter in 8 hours, and we paid bonus every year before it became statutory. So, I mean, that's the culture that we've imbibed.
Great, sir. Thank you.
So I have a follow-up question on that. What are the qualities or the priorities which you look in a new hire? Let it be like on the CXO levels or a fresher level. What would be the qualities which you really look into, or we are keen on finding out in a fresh hire, like a new hire, not a fresh, a new hire?
So I'm saying the usual qualities that you look at in terms of integrity, honesty, all that, if you can judge that. But when I joined the business, I was working outside somewhere, but when I joined the business, one of the first tasks that I was made, not even before I joined the business, while I was doing my engineering, and I was staying in my grandfather's house, and there's a workshop right in front, and there was a production house behind. And when I first went in there, every Saturday, Sunday, and every post-college hours, I have to report there. And the first job that I was given was to change 4 tires of a car. And I thought, I'm the owner's grandson, and why am I changing car tires? I didn't ask that question because I was too scared of him. The next job that I was given was to clean the bathroom. It was not a very exciting job, definitely. But what I learned, and then when I went and questioned my grandfather about it, he said that ഇവിടെ പണിയെടുക്കണമെങ്കിൽ എല്ലാ പണിയും ചെയ്യണം. Don't have an attitude when you come here. So I think that has gone through the organization. So anybody who used to join, today we have restricted that practice of cleaning bathrooms at least, but the rest of it still holds true. So I think the attitude that you are ready to do any job, and not that if you're a GM, you'll do only this, I will not pick up the chair and move it, or things of that sort. I think that's not what we look for. The attitude to do anything is what we look for.
I have a question to Naveen sir. Sir, actually, now the technology is coming into this automobile service sector. A lot of mobile apps are coming for servicing the mobile, that mobile garages are there. So, how do you see that, and is there is a future in such kind of technology apps and all, and do you really interested to invest in such kind of apps and technology-driven platforms?
So just before coming here, we were discussing with a company called Coovers, which is into distribution of spare parts through a platform which they have created. And so it's in direct competition to us. We distribute spare parts of OEMs. They distribute any spare part. So if you are a workshop, you can call them up or use their app. And so we're looking at investing in that. While having said that, in terms of mobile apps, if you look at the end of it, somebody has to do the work at the workshop. And today you have a certain, so I don't know how many of you remember that Carnation was started off by Jagdish Katta, who was the MD of Maruti for a long period of time. And it was started in the similar form. There was a Carnation app, you could use the app, book a service, etc. But, and senior most people from Maruti, and Azim Premji and Gaja Capital had invested 250 crores in the organization. But at the end of it, somebody actually has to get the work done. Okay, the mobile app will not repair the vehicle. And it came to a point where he finally called us up and said, in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, can you run the workshops for me? And the app will get you the customer, but for repairing the car and ensuring it goes out on time, I don't have the wherewithal, nor can I train the people to the extent that you guys have already done. So why don't you? And we actually ran the Carnation workshop in Cochin for a period of 1 year before the private equity decided to close down the company. So.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Johnny sir, my question to you.
Are you sure me?
Yeah.
I thought you wanted to pull this later.
No, he'll take care of me later. Automobile is equal to transportation is all what you've been saying so far now. But automobile is equal to adventure is also a very, very, very big aspect, which I think you were part of earlier, but are not there right now. How would you see that scenario? How do you go about it?
So I mean, what you're trying to say is that we started Popular Rally, right? Sorry.
Yes, we started Popular Rally way back in '83. Okay. And we've been the longest single sponsor for any rally across the country for almost 26, 27 years. I mean, there was a break, but the last rally we conducted was in 2019. And you would agree with me, 2021 were not the best years to conduct a rally. So whether we will do it again, I'm not too sure, because it's becoming so very, very expensive and very difficult to do. There are not enough people who really want to run the rally. I mean, organizing a rally is also not a, forget sponsoring but organizing a rally has also become very, very difficult. So if there is, and if we can invest, we'll still be, because in Kerala, if you say rally, other than political rally, the next rally is popular rally.
Yeah, I had a question actually. So we hear that OEMs have started coming up with the subscription model for the cars. They directly are offering like that. So are we looking at something like that where we offer subscription models, especially for electric? so that people can.
So right now we don't have an electric car in our portfolio, but Maruti is offering a subscription model and we dealers are implementing it. So if any person wants to use the subscription model on Maruti or Honda, they can actually approach any of the dealers and we facilitate that process as such. So that is happening. So.
Okay, but those seems to be like a too costly affair that because of which people are not getting it. As an OEM with so much power actually, are you not looking at something like that where you have a bit true value also, where you can offer second-hand cars also?
So on second-hand cars, we have offered something in terms of use of a car for a certain period of time. But the problem in India is that the insurance sector, as of today, is on the car and not the person. So in US and in the other developed markets, the insurance is on the human being and not on the car per se. So if you as a driver use the car, you meet with an accident, it is your insurance premium that goes up. Unfortunately, over here, it's the car's insurance premium that goes up. So if I give you a car for subscription, you decide, you use it, you go bang up the car, come and return it, and then you walk away, you're still scot-free. But I'll have to suffer these premiums of the car. So till that model changes, and it will probably change within the next 1 year or 2 years, because all insurance companies have taken this up, in which case even dealers and all other OEMs can start offering it at a much cheaper pay. Today they are costing in the safety factor also into the pricing of the vehicle. That's the issue.
So you can do it for used cars also.
And you can do it for used cars also.
Thank you.
I have a question to either of you could answer it. You said you're a professionally run organization today, but I think most of us here as startups, etc., we would be running the organization ourselves. And the time when we have to professionalize, first question, normally it's very difficult for the entrepreneur or the person who started, the founder, to let go. And we've seen this as a reason for many organizations cascading, and because as you said, there's only so much that one person can do. What do you have to say on when startups actually start professionalizing? How do you get the right people in? Because when you're small, you don't get people in also. So what do you have to say to that?
So I think in our case, as we scaled up and when we decided to take private equity and move ahead and scale up the business, what we studied across the world, we realized that there are certain strengths that we have as entrepreneurs, but some of the things are missing from our repertoire. And to get people at that, to run that part of the business. So in fact, in 2016, we hired a CEO who was from the best institutes of India, the IIT, IIM camp, and we actually paid him more than each one of us were drawing as salaries. And the reason is that he came with a set of not just talent, but in terms of implementing, being very particular and scrutinizing, etc., which we wouldn't have done as entrepreneurs or we wouldn't have done as founders. So I think whether it's a startup or whether it's an age-old business, I think the founder has to be brutally honest to himself, or the family has to be brutally honest, saying that we don't have a certain capability and we need to hire that. Because the focus should be in terms of growing the business, not in terms of letting go of control. So I think that's a conscious decision. I think it's easier for me to let go, but it would have been tougher for them to let go. And I think hats off to them, because all of us bought into the idea at the same time. And I think we progress much faster because there's one person who's actually more intelligent than us in that room while we discuss a particular topic. And that really helped.
You know, when we were young, when we were learning how to drive, my dad would allow us to go with the drivers and drive around. He never gave us the car until we got our license. And when I say this, we were driving around when we were 14, 15 years old, very comfortably in town. But when I started driving, the first time he gave me the car, the first few times, he suddenly one evening, when I was driving him back home from somewhere, he said, I mean, in the sense, in English, we would say, look ahead and drive. This was not only for driving. It is the general theory of life. you look ahead and do what you have to. If you have a vision of where you want your company to do it, you aim for that vision and start working for that vision. And when you have that vision, you must think whether you can do it alone. If you cannot do it alone, then you have to find somebody to help you do it. And if you can't do that, your vision will remain a vision. So you have to be very, very sincere about your vision and how to implement it.
Good evening, sir. Sir, over the past few years, especially in the Kerala market, we would have seen a lot of uncertainty in demand due to COVID or multiple floods. This would have effectively led to a lot of pile-up of inventories or shortage of inventories. Is there any insights on how you would have managed your working capital? No, it would have been a very stressful time over the past few years, right?
Actually, to be really honest, I think the 2 COVID years have been the best years for us. Not because we manage our inventory well or something. I think shortage always drives up demand in terms of customers. Pricing is always easier. Customers are looking to get a car, not looking at a discount. So that way it helped. But in terms of the inventory thing, we have a calculation within the organization as to how much inventory we would hold. And we have certain peak months. We have built a sort of algorithm to know what would be the peak month. So nobody can actually beat that and order cars in excess or order less, etc. So that always helps. So there is a program in place so that no one person can take a wrong decision on that.
I'll just elaborate on what he said. In the first few months of the COVID, that is 20 March to May, we did land up with a little excess inventory. But then everybody was in short supply, no? In the sense even the manufacturer was closed. So when we opened, it took another month or so before it picked up, before they could start supplies. So our inventory went dry. And in 21, you would have all heard of the chip shortage, famous chip shortage, not only in India, it's world over. If you're waiting for 4 months to get a car in India, you're waiting for a year to get a car in the US. So actually we didn't do much of it. In fact, our better profits was, one of the main reasons was because we didn't have inventory.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, sirs. My name is George. I represent SCMS Group of Institutions. Thank you, first of all, for a very insightful talk on entrepreneurship. I have a couple of questions which I think either of you all can answer. The first question is probably taking us in time to 2012 when there was a factory violence which happened in Manesar, and due to which there was a 6-month shutdown of the plant. Now, that is probably again linked to the question on inventory. So the question is, how did you deal with that kind of a unprecedented or a unplanned crisis, or a crisis which came in at a very short notice, so a 6-month shutdown. So how did you deal with that? The second question is probably specifically to you, Naveen sir. You spoke about service transparency, the transparency of services when you give a vehicle. Now, 20 years back, that was not the case. Even today, I mean, how would you ensure that? Today, if I give my vehicle for service today morning, I get it back by, say, today evening or maybe tomorrow evening, and they say, okay, I've done these things. And I'm sitting at home and I'm really not checking. Probably I don't have that luxury of checking. So how do we still ensure that that transparency is there? I mean, how is that?
So on the Manesar lockdown, actually, we as dealers don't have much of a role. The manufacturer itself, so Maruti does not operate out of one plant. Maruti operates out of various plants. And the manufacturer itself had rejigged their manufacturing thing. So they started manufacturing what cars were in demand across the other units. So we didn't face much of a problem per se. In terms of transparency, so what we've done, so a lot of customers are not bothered. I'm saying they don't want to go through the hassle of knowing what's happening in the car, as long as the car comes back in ship and shape thing. But there are certain customers who would like to know the transparency. One, we allow them to actually visit the shop floor if they want to and see what is happening in the car. We've also taken videos of what has been done on the car while that process, and it's WhatsApped it to them in terms of this is what has been happening. So that's a regular practice. So there are certain customers who want it. There are certain customers who want it live. So that is also being done.
So can I ask you, that is available across your service outlets?
That's across all service outlets.
Okay.
So we tell the customer, if the customer requires it.
Okay.
There's no use keeping on bombarding the customer saying, "I'm video edutha
Sure.
It'll work in the reverse.
No, my
it's like a
question-
call center calling and saying, one day service ido. We also do that.
So my
apologies for all the people who have been bombarded with calls. But this is a service that we provide.
So my question is, if tomorrow if I give my car for service and I ask them for a video, they can, they are in a position to give it.
Don't hold us for it tomorrow, but
No.
we're trying to.
No, I didn't know that. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Actually, before the billing is done, even today, as a practice, before the billing is done, your bill is sent to you. And only when you approve it, it's billed. That practice has been there for the last few years, I think 4 or 5 years now.
Good evening, sir. Naveen sir, you were talking about market expansion, like new territories. Look, in the initial days, how did you go about in the market expansion to Tamil Nadu and Karnataka? How did you handle the political and operational issues in such expansions?
So politically, we have never faced an issue in any of the states that we've expanded to. So that has not been a problem at all. The way we chose markets is that Kerala, actually there's no metro city in Kerala per se, though we are one large metro if you take whole of Kerala as such, but we don't have a Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, a Chennai or a Hyderabad. So when we wanted to expand, we first decided that we would want to expand to a metro city to see if the workings of a metro city are very different from a state like Kerala, both in terms of manpower costs, rental costs, servicing, all that, and sales per salesperson, etc. So we expanded to Chennai and then to Bangalore. So these are the two markets that we chose. And from there, we have started expanding into the outskirts of Tamil Nadu, outskirts of Chennai and outskirts of Bangalore.
See, usually when a dealership comes up, suddenly somebody decides, okay, I'll go for the dealership. I'm talking about people from outside the dealership market. When we went for the dealership, the moment we applied for Maruti, within the year, we wanted to make it a dealership, not just a Maruti dealer or a particular car dealer. We wanted it to be as a dealer in the whole market. Okay, later on, our two-wheeler dealership went away, and we continued with Maruti and our truck dealership, that is Tata. It was originally DCM Toyota, but when DCM Toyota closed down, we went for Tata Motors. Recently, we have gone back into the two-wheeler market, not on IC engines. We have a Ather dealership in Trivandrum and Kollam. The reason is we want to find out how that market is developing. Otherwise, we could have just said, we're not in the two-wheeler business, so we'll keep away. But that's not, so everything new that comes up, we went to Chennai, all that, we just decided we have to go, we have to expand. Earlier I said, look ahead.
Hello, sir. This is Harikrishnan here. Since you explained about the PE capital being funded, so how far is the cost of capital going to be before you were in a kind of a organic or VC invested growth, and now you're looking for inorganic growth. So how far the cost of capital is going to define the progress of the company and after you get the PE? And will they put some clauses like the conditions for growth, like you had to go 10x or 25x or 50x in the next so and so sort of year? So will that pressure could be efficiently managed depending upon the market conditions? And will the PE cost of capital be working in mind or working in terms of the further growth of the firm?
So we have already taken PE capital. So that we took in 2015. Okay. And whatever growth that we had envisaged while we took the capital, we have been able to deliver to them. The cost of capital of PE funds is always higher if you look at, because they would be looking at an exit in some way, either through an IPO or to selling out through a larger PE, etc. So that process is just starting. So over this year and next year, we will be giving them an exit from that. So hopefully with the current size that we have achieved, we should be able to give them a reasonable exit.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, John, sir, and Naveen, for that very informative session. And thank you, Rajesh, for actually taking this, asking the right kind of questions. So as a token of appreciation, request MSA to hand over a memento to Rajesh. Request Anisha to hand over the memento to John, sir. Request Jacob to come forward and hand over the memento to Naveen.
Jacob is the person who put a message in our group saying that coffee pe Charcha, there's no coffee.
Thank you, and now we will break for coffee and snacks. Thank you.